The plan today, if we can start with our agenda, there we go. We were just going to share a little bit about who we are. As John mentioned, context is actually really important, and our context is a little bit different to our friend at Defence because they've got contractors coming onto their sites where they've got their own people. We don't really have that, so our context is a little bit different. Then we're going to take you through just a little brief bit about the journey that we've been on so far with our contractor management, and then share with you kind of a little case study around a piece of work that we're doing to refresh our contractor expectations, which is the document for us that sets those minimum requirements for the contracting partners like Parker that we work with at NZTA. So, as we were sort of talking about in terms of context, you'll be able to tell that a really critical part of our context is that we actually run an outsourced model. Without our partners, we can't deliver on that commitment that we have to deliver a safe and accessible land transport system to all of you and to the rest of New Zealand.
Yeah. So I guess it's worth noting that we've got somewhat of a spectrum of contracting arrangements we engage in, from direct service delivery, like our AA and our VTNZ service suppliers, through to something more hybrid, like our safety cameras and our PPPs. And then we go through all the way through to more complex partnerships that we've got in place, so like our maintenance and operations contracts, or our NOCs, which are changing shortly to IDCs. These integrate our professional services and our physical works contracts for maintaining and operating our road networks. And then we have our alliances as well, which is another kettle of fish. These are collaborative contracts where NZTA and then contractors work together as a single entity or a single team, sharing risks and rewards to achieve project goals. And so I think, sort of referring back to what Sue was saying, one of the reasons we're highlighting this sort of spectrum of different contracting arrangements that we have, our level of influence and control kind of varies and changes as we go through those, and that's one of the most challenging things that we face, is trying to navigate exactly where we sit on that continuum of 100 to, or 0 to 100% in terms of our influence. On top of that, some of those partnerships that we enter into in these contracting relationships are long. They're really long-lasting ones. Most of our maintenance contracts, those NOCs that Jodie was referring to, they've been in play for 9 or 10 years already. And then, although we've got work really moving at pace with some of our big capital projects, like our roads of national significance or regional significance, I think there's about 6 or 7 of those going out over the next couple of years. We're actually working to a 10-year construction timeline on a lot of those projects. So they're long-lasting relationships that we have with our partners. So to add to that complexity, we also have got these other roles that we outside of being a client. So we also act as a regulator and the biggest road controlling authority in Aotearoa. So and it's also worth noting that those roles aren't always easy to separate, but due to, I guess, their level of strategic and operating overlap, which also means many of our people actually have to wear multiple hats as well.
It can be quite grey sometimes for us to pull those roles apart. And then on top of all of that variety, we've also got volume. Boy, have we got volume. Particularly on the side of the business that Jodie and I work on, which is called Transport Services, or Te Toki. That's the part of our business that's focused on designing, delivering, operating and maintaining our state highway network and all of the infrastructure associated with it.
So a few more facts for you, sorry guys. On the maintenance and operations side.
Numbers nerds.
We've got 19 NOCs. We've got 3 alliances currently. We've got two PPPs running currently, and we've also got the 2 operation centres, which we mentioned earlier, across the 5 regions of New Zealand. In the capital space, we've got 17 major national and 10 regional transport projects either underway or in the pipeline, along with over 130 other projects in active construction at the moment too. So a big workload there. And that's not including the 80 or so that are in post-implementation or defect stage, and another 70-ish or so that are in pre-implementation ready to kick off.
So you can see how contractor management is considered critical for NZTA.
It's helped you understand a little bit about our context and some of the complexity and environment that we're kind of operating and working in, with folks like Parker and Fulton Hogan, down and many of the other civil contracting companies and lots of specialists out there as well. And look, it's fair to say that our journey hasn't always been straightforward in terms of contractor management. Sometimes we have swerved a little bit to the underreach side of the road, course corrected back to the overreach side. Occasionally we've even stalled. We just thought we'd share some of the more recent kind of waypoints on our journey with you here. So I suspect, like a few of you here today, some of the lessons that we've learned have come through tragedy. March of 2019, three of our contractors, three people from our contracting partners lost their lives while working on a roadside in Whakatane. And then in September of the same year, we had a very young cyclist lost her life when she was struck by a truck entering a work site. So, as I'm sure you can imagine, that was terrible. It was really awful. And for us, it sparked a real acceleration point in us thinking about how we were going to work with our contractors going forward, and really kicking it up a notch to start to improve the way that we were doing that and working with our partners. So one of the things we did late 2019, early 2020, it got a bit impacted by COVID, which was another sort of cool part of the journey. We stood up what we called our critical risk team, because we knew that we needed to uplift some of our some capacity within our business. We needed to create some more capacity to help us improve and drive this journey forward. They were set up with the mandate to go out there on our network to interface directly with people like Parker and our other partners, get to know them and actually start to build that relationship, start to understand each other a little bit better, but also, to Sue's point, to have a look and to start working with our own people internally to start to uplift their capabilities so that they were understanding what their roles and responsibilities were too in relation to contractor management.
So then comes 2023. We made some really key changes that meant we were more aligned with the structure of transport services. The idea was to make sure we were working as effectively as we could with both an internal and an external lens. So once we had the right people in the right place, we got really tight on what we were going to focus on to get the most benefit. So how we chose those focus areas was based on what we saw as our main responsibilities as a client. So the first of those was improving our procurement practices. We wanted to make sure we were setting our contracts and our relationships up for success right from the start. The second was uplifting our internal capability. We wanted our people to know that what their role is and that the tasks they were responsible for, and the ones that and more specifically, I guess, the ones that they weren't responsible for.
Yeah.
Number three was increasing our second line of monitoring and assurance. So we wanted to make sure we were achieving the outcomes that we'd procured for and planned for. So we don't really have time to go through all the things that we've done in that space over the last couple of years, but because procurement is such an important one for us, we thought we'd take you through one of the changes we've made as a bit of a case study. I guess to highlight the cultural changes NZTA has been driving, which aligns with the subject of this master course, which is obviously contractor management.
Yeah. And we recognise too, and I think Sue had such a lovely way of putting this about being really clear about why you're doing what you're doing. Are you doing it because you think it's a legislative requirement, or are you actually making a policy decision because you think it's something that you should do? And I think you alluded to the expectations of a government department, or in our case, actually a Crown agency, feel a little bit different to us. So bear that in mind while you're sort of thinking about what we've chosen to do. And
one of the things off the back of that probably is that WorkSafe explicitly states in their PCBU's working together guidance is that the lead PCBU is expected to set clear health and safety expectations and incorporate them into the contracts for their contractors. So we set out to revise and update NZTA's contractor expectations, which we use for all our professional services and physical works projects and contracts, I guess to make sure we focus on setting reasonable performance standard for the work that we're procuring.
And look,
we recognise that we're also, apart from being a Crown agency, we're actually one of the largest civil construction clients in New Zealand. So we thought if we could land this bit of work really well, actually do a good job of walking that, what feels like quite a tight line between underreach and not doing enough, and overreach and specifying controls, and sort of veering into that. If we could actually stay on that path and land this really well, we hope that what we do will actually ripple out across the industry and start to have some influence further out. So we sort of recognise that level of influence that we have out there, and our aim from the start was to be really clear on the outcomes that we want to see, and then make sure that we actually align our monitoring and assurance to those outcomes.
We also thought a nice cherry on the top would be to end up with something that would actually help our contracting partners when they are responding to tender opportunities, but as well as preparing for any of the monitoring and assurance assessments that NZTA does. We even thought it might drive some improvement in the development of health and safety management plans that we see regularly on sites. A lot of them come across as poorly structured, I guess, and missing key information. So that's probably a topic for another day, though.
Maybe another master course then one day, John. So the first thing we did to get started was to just have a look across our industry here in New Zealand, in Australia, some other industries, to have a look at what other people were doing in this space, just to get an idea of some of the areas that we could look to improve what we were currently doing with our contractor expectations. But we knew to get it right that we would have to do a lot of engagement, both internally at NZTA Waka Kotahi, but also externally, obviously, with our partners too. And we knew that we would need to do this in a very authentic and open way. With our internal people, what we wanted to do was make sure that we covered all of the groups in NZTA, anyone that could be affected by the outcome of these contractor expectations, and also anyone that might have an expert view that would either add value and help inform, or even challenge our thinking, just to make sure that we were really covering that.
So I guess that led us to talk to a lot of people, and I tell you, a lot of people. NZTA is a big place. Many of our transport services team were involved right across that group, and of course our internal health and safety team provided their feedback as well. Most of you will be aware of the changes in the TTM space at the moment. So obviously our TTM project team were also engaged and talked to. Our procurement team, who help us obviously to make sure the contractor expectations would work in harmony with our existing procurement models and contracts, as well as the future ones. And I guess like dominoes, it's also helped us to identify places we'd need to make changes when we implement our contractor expectations. So all the manuals and the forms and all the other collateral that we've got. Obviously, we talked to our legal team. They had a bit to say, who helped us navigate things like what we can reasonably expect from our partners when legal privilege and things like that are involved.
Yeah. So we also talked to some people like our environmental and sustainability experts, and they helped us to find some of the overlaps with our requirements and their requirements, to try and make this a little bit more of a streamlined experience for our contracting partners that are using these, when we're sort of looking across the holistic requirements that NZTA has for our contractors. Another thing that we did, which was really important, because so much of the work that we do is connected to the land, it was really important that we involved and talked to our multicultural advisors as well, just to make sure that we'd actually correctly included some really difficult concepts, like the cultural impacts of the work that we do. And an example of that is where a health and safety person might identify that a hazard can be eliminated. Tikanga or kawa might actually suggest a different way of needing to manage that, and we needed to make sure that we were working that into our requirements.
So on an external basis, we set up a focus group with many of our supply partners, with representation from our professional services providers, but also our physical work partners, and even our mobile safety cameras were involved. We also talked to people like CHASNZ. I don't know if anyone saw the webinar, but we wanted to make sure that we understand the needs of the businesses, I guess, that sit in those subcontracting roles as well. This is really important because, like I said, it's important that we understand the role that they play across the contracting chain. So the requirements in our contract expectations will apply to our contractors, subcontractors, and their subcontractors too. And of course, we talked to CHASNZ. Finally, we ran a survey across industry to, I guess, test some of the key changes that we were looking to implement, and I guess, help to reinforce that detailed engagement that we'd already run.
Yeah. One of the not so secrets was being really upfront and honest about what the people we talked to could influence and what they actually couldn't. That's what we meant by needing to do this in a really authentic and open way. We wanted to make sure that we were managing people's expectations, because we knew that there would likely be things that we just couldn't take on board. Sometimes that was because their views conflicted with an expert's views or advice. Sometimes it was just the limitation to the systems that we have to work with, like our reporting requirements or our reporting system that we have. I suspect that sounds a little bit negative and a bit defeatist. Why not take everyone's views on board? Why not change those systems? But it actually wasn't negative at all. It was where the first part of the culture change in our organisation actually stemmed from, because those were those golden opportunities where we had a person who didn't understand the expert's view on something. What an awesome opportunity to help coach and educate and bring them on board with that and bring them on board with the journey. The other really cool thing that it did was it enabled us to lift up our hood and let our partners have a little bit of a look underneath that hood, where we had constraints that we couldn't change. And as I mentioned, our reporting requirements was one. I get it. We know that there are challenges around the use of lag indicating data, right? Incident reporting data, we know. But unfortunately, we have an obligation, a reporting obligation that goes all the way up to our minister, the Minister of Transport, that requires us to gather and report on incident rates. We're working to change that and influence and improve it, but we knew we wouldn't have that change across the line by the time that we needed this document. What was really great about that was that by being able to be open and by being able to give our partners more of a view of some of the constraints and things about the way that we were working and had to work, it helped them to understand us a little bit better, and that meant that we actually could work together better as well.
So some of the key takeaways, I guess, from the process that we ran was that we recommend that you, if you run a process similar, that you talk to as many people as you can. You take that opportunity and you run with it. You need to make sure that you be open and clear about what they can influence and what they can't. And I also take the opportunity this kind of engagement creates to educate and build relationships across a wider group than I guess you'd normally be exposed to. And one last key thing on integrity, close the loop. It's really important that you make sure that you go back to those really wonderful people that have provided you with feedback and taken that time out of their busy lives to give that to you and let them know where you've actually taken it on, where you haven't, and crucially, why.
There have been a few things from the existing contractor expectations that we've kept, and we've updated them. But a lot of work has been done to make sure that we are being really clear on the outcomes that we want to see, not specifying controls. Instead, we want to make sure that the heart of this document is focused on effective risk management, identify the hazards, assess the risks, apply reasonably practicable controls, using the hierarchy of controls, and I know, John, you've got some views on that, but it's what's in our legislation, so we'll go with it for now. And then make sure that you're checking that they're working and keep doing that. Keep checking and keep improving it.
We also simplified our expectations by merging two pretty large complex documents together. By integrating our overarching requirements and our reporting requirements, we actually reduced the content down from about 50 pages to about 14, go us. And we did that without compromising any of the quality of the content. So that was a real bonus that we took away, and I think the rest of our organisation and our contractors will be pretty happy with that.
Another thing that we did was we've actually reduced our monthly reporting requirements. So we currently require every incident, event, near miss of any kind to be reported to us in quite a high level of detail. The reality is that we are finding that having that additional data and detail isn't actually adding a lot of additional insight to what we know about the performance of our contractors. In fact, it's actually sometimes obscuring the really important stuff that we should be focusing on. The high harm events, the high potential events that could have caused a high level of harm. That's where we actually need to lean in. And by lean in, I don't mean tell the contractors how to do their investigation. I mean seek the assurance that they are doing what they said they would do, identifying the right actions to take so that they're either eliminating or minimising that the likelihood of that event happening again. It also means that we will then have the capacity to focus a little bit and make sure that we're understanding where we might have had a role to play in that or had some influence, which I think is linking back to what Sue said. It's starting to create some capacity for us to have the time to actually think about what our influence was in that situation, if any, depending on that circumstance. Again, just being really clear on what our role is and what it's not.
There's also been some new additions to the document. So despite being able to reduce that content down, we actually were able to add some new additions in, and important ones as well. So one of those was the roles and responsibilities section. So through our monitoring activities, we've been able to see the positive impact that quality, health and safety people, so all of you, a lot of you, bring to our projects and contracts. So we took the opportunity to clarify our expectations when it comes to the presence and competence of health and safety resources, especially those advising and supporting our projects and contracts. And also to set some really practical requirements for our partners, for how our partners will work together. So talking about our overlapping duties here. We're asking that they spend some time up front to work out all those important safety activities and obligations and agree who's going to do them, who's going to have some influence over how they're done, and who just needs to know about them. So we largely sit in those last two categories, but more than likely we're in that last category. By the way, it's probably a great way of actually navigating your over and under reach as well. So we've also included an ask that we get notified of any intent to introduce innovations to your projects, and that there is some process around this. So just so we can seek assurance that the risks are being controlled and unexpected or unintended consequences are being identified and managed.
One of the other things about reducing some of that lag reporting and some of the burden that was putting on our contractors meant that we had the ability to negotiate with them some leading indicators, some mandatory leading indicators. We actually went to our partners and we asked them what they already capture, and we worked with them to figure out some leading indicators that they would be able to share with us that would actually give us some insight. And honestly, I'd have actually been, don't listen Parker, I'd have been really happy if we could have landed on 2. We actually managed to land on 3, so that was really exciting. So we've got leadership engagements, which is a nice view of your culture, but the one that I'm particularly passionate about is those frontline inspections and control verifications. Also completed actions and improvements. So that was a pretty big win. And look, I know it's not perfect. We're still counting data. We unfortunately only have the capacity to get those through in a quantitative way at the moment. I know it's not perfect, but it is on top of our other proactive inspections and insurance assessments that we do ourselves. It's another piece in that jigsaw puzzle, and it's all coming together to form a more holistic picture of our contracting partners' performance. Another thing that we got, and just linking back to why we want to do that, it's helping us to actually check that we are getting those outcomes that we procured for.
right at the start. So another thing that we got some quite good feedback around was relating to legal privilege. The aim that we wanted to get to there was to make sure that we were providing clarity around how that can work in a way that enables us to retain the visibility that we need as a client without compromising our partner's obligations when they're in a legal privilege situation. And so that was a really important thing to be able to land.
Another super hard thing to do was we had to prise our hands off the steering wheel for a minute and actually take a look and remove some of the beautiful descriptions in our current contract expectations around our internal processes, because obviously they're not relevant to the current audience, our contracting partners. They really don't need to know all about our internal project lifecycle or our performance review process. But you never want to waste good content, so we'll actually recycle that into some internal guidance for our own people. We also took out a lot of the links and the descriptions and the copy and paste of regulations and industry guidance. We're comfortable that our selection and monitoring process are robust enough to pick up any of our partners that aren't actually staying up to date with these. The only exceptions are a couple that are particularly relevant to our work and particularly relevant at the moment. And that was one around our TTM, so our NZG TTM guidance, because obviously that's quite prevalent at the moment. And also, I don't know if any of you have heard of it, but the Temporary Works Procedural Control Good Practice Guideline.
Mouthful.
Yeah,
that's why I gave her this bit.
Because it's really good it's a really good document, but it's quite obscure and not a lot of people know about it. So we left that in. We added that in.
So there were also some things that we actually really had to let go of, and here's your overreach 101. We understand that our partners, organisations and their subcontractors are usually the ones that are in control of the site and the workers and the work being done. So they will be in the best position to know how to control the risks. And so we had to be really vigilant, making sure that we stayed absolutely committed to keeping the focus on outcomes rather than specifying control measures. It sounds really simple, right? It's actually not. It's really hard. It was so easy to slip up and start talking about exclusion zones instead of managing the risk of people and plant interacting, or start talking about plant registers rather than the risk of poorly maintained equipment. And it gets even more complex when you start to think about the world of training. How do we talk? So talking about needing to bring on board competent and capable workers, not talking about having site-safe passports. Even to the extent of saying it's really great if you can make sure that your workers are engaged and involved in health and safety, but not telling you that you need health and safety committees and X number of reps. And the list goes on, numbers of first aiders. No, just manage emergency scenarios. It sounds simple, but when you actually start to write it down and get into the detail, it's actually a lot harder than you would think. Every single time we had to check ourselves and make sure that we were staying in the right lane.
And depending on, I guess, if you're an introvert or an extrovert, some of you might have a little internal sigh of relief, or be actually overwhelmed with joy to hear that we've actually removed the prescriptive requirement around PPE. We know that it's our partners who are responsible for doing that, the risk assessment associated with the work that they do, and identifying the appropriate PPE when needed. So we've taken that out.
So we know that we've made some really good improvements. The feedback's actually been pretty good, but the journey of continuous improvement never ends, right?
Absolutely. A good example of what might be on the horizon is obviously leading indicators. We alluded to that a bit earlier. Under the current contractor expectations, sharing these with us is actually voluntary, so we get a little bit of inconsistent information there. We're actually looking at making those mandatory, which was to improve that consistency, number one. We also wanted to make sure that they were indicators that would actually provide us with some insight rather than just counting numbers for the sake of counting them. We also wanted to make sure we did it in a way that wouldn't actually bring added burden to our contracting partners. So we talked to them, we asked them what would work, and they pretty much gave us the answers, which was great. Although we were able to land 3 indicators, like Fiona said earlier, we're still only able to collect quantitative data. We know that for lead indicators, and John's gone, but I know that he...
Did we upset you so badly you had to move back?
He may be. We know the gold lies in the qualitative, but we just don't have the systems or the capability to actually analyse that data at the moment. So at the moment we're staying with quantitative, and it's a journey. So that's definitely an opportunity though for the future. Perhaps we'll be able to use AI or better digital tools to do something more interesting going forward.
And look, we also know that we've got further to go on our journey around assurance and monitoring. Like with our contractor expectations, we've made some really good gains, some really positive steps forward over the last couple of years, but there is definitely more work to do there, just to make sure that we're focusing on the right stuff in terms of our role and where it's actually really going to bring value. One thing we also know is that the journey has been more than just reviewing a couple of documents. It's helped to drive a real shift in our culture. It's created opportunities for us to coach and uplift. I'm going to try not to take that too personally. It's created opportunities for us to deliver coaching and uplift across our organisation, and it's actually left us with stronger relationships and more trust with our partners than we've ever had. And that's something that we definitely want to keep building on and keep improving. That's where we think we've landed anyway. Parker, however, will be able to tell you whether we actually did.